Welcome to the Baseball Discourse with your host, Dan Lavallo.
Hi, everybody. We are putting the latest edition of Baseball Discourse together on this October the 9th after a wild day of baseball playoff games yesterday, the 8th of October. Let's begin with the first game, Cleveland and Tampa Bay. What a wild game. 15 innings. What was the time of the game? 5 hours and 15 minutes. At what time did the game end? 5:15 p.m. Eastern. Some karma there. And then Oscar Gonzalez hits the home run off of Corey Kluber, and Cleveland wins 1-0. I'm not going to say that I made the right prediction, but I did put on Twitter, and you can go to my Twitter feed, an hour before the home run, I had the sense that this game would be decided by a home run, and it was, as the Indians prevail 1-0, and now they'll go on to play the Yankees in the divisional series. And I'm telling you right now, the Yankees are going to have their hands full. Cleveland has a good young team. They have a good young pitching staff, and it depends which Yankees lineup shows up, because that lineup at times is devastating. At other times, it has more holes than Swiss cheese. And if the Indians pitch the Yankees the right way and catch the Yankees at the right time, the Yankees are going to have their hands full. And the Yankees pitching, well, I'll tell you right now, Garrett Cole, he might be the ace. He might be making millions of dollars a year. But I am more confident if you're the Yankees with Nestor Cortez on the mound rather than Garrett Cole. And remember, Aaron Boone, the Yankees manager, has not announced his starting pitcher yet for Game 1. Earlier, he had said it would be Garrett Cole, but then he backtracked. So we'll find out in the next couple of days who's starting for the Yankees. Should be an interesting series. Then you had that Seattle-Toronto game. And let's face it, it's going to be a long offseason for the Blue Jays, who are a good team. But 8-1, the Blue Jays are leading late. And then Seattle with that unbelievable rally to win 10-9. And then you had the collision in the outfield with George Springer and George Bichette and Bo Bichette, George Springer and Bo Bichette. And I've got to tell you, it reminded me of the time I was broadcasting a game for the New Britain Rockcats. This was in 2015, the first year the ball club was affiliated with the Colorado Rockies. And Trevor Story, playing shortstop, collided with David Dahl playing center field on a similar ball that was hit in the Seattle-Toronto game that led to the collision of Springer and Bichette. And it did not end well for David Dahl. He ended up having to leave the game, and the injury led to the removal of his spleen at New Britain General Hospital. So when I saw that collision between George Springer and Bo Bichette, I immediately hearkened back to that day. It was a day game when David Dahl and Trevor Story collided in shallow center field at New Britain Stadium. And oh, by the way, let me add that George Springer spent many a day at New Britain Stadium. He was from New Britain, or is from New Britain, and used to go to New Britain Stadium all the time. Then he went to UConn and has put together a very, very good Major League Baseball career, so we wish him well. But going to be a long season for the Blue Jays, up 8-1 late, and you blow the game in your ballpark and lose 10-9. And it works out very well for Seattle because it now gives the Mariners time to align their very good pitching staff to get ready for the Houston Astros. That should be an interesting series. The Astros obviously are the odds-on favorite, but don't undersell the Seattle Mariners. They've got a great pitching staff, and it might be solid enough to give the Astros some fits. We'll get to the Mets and Padres in a moment because that's the only series still alive. Let's take a quick look at Philadelphia and St. Louis. I mean, what a game. The Phillies knocking off a divisional winner in that divisional winner's ballpark, St. Louis. And quite a finish. Phillies up 2-0, solidly pitched game by Nola. And then you go to the ninth inning. First two batters are out. 2 outs, nobody on base. Last of the ninth, the Cardinals trailing 2-0. And then base hit. How about Pujols? Albert Pujols gets a base hit in his last at-bat. Molina, a base hit. Just incredible to see what happened. The next thing you know, the Cardinals have runners at first and third, 2 outs in the bottom of the ninth. Boy, isn't it awfully difficult in a close game for a closer, particularly a close playoff game, for a closer to have a 1-2-3 ninth inning. I mean, even when it seems the closer is dominant, gets the first two batters in the inning, it becomes, in a tight ball game, a tough road to hoe for that last out. And so it was, but the Cardinals end up falling to the Phillies 2-0, a dramatic ending to that game. And now the Phillies will go on to face the Braves, and they really do have their work cut out for them against Atlanta. Then we get to the Mets and the Padres, as I said in my previous podcast, arguably the biggest game Buck Showalter has ever managed until tonight's game, the deciding game of that three-game series. That might have been the most ho-hum of the four games played yesterday. I'll tell you what, when that game started, Jacob deGrom looked lights out, but then he had some difficulty in the middle innings, and that's got to be pause for concern if you're the Mets and you win and go on to play the Dodgers, both the pitching of Scherzer and deGrom. But let that go. Blake Snell was horrible, and he would be the first to tell you, when the Padres needed a pitcher to come up big, the former 2018 Cy Young Award winner with Tampa Bay did not come up big. His control wasn't there. He struggled. His pitch count was high early in the game, and eventually he came out early in the game. And the Padres, well, I don't want to say they let one get away because they're still in good shape, but the Padres had a chance because they did get to deGrom a little bit. And now it's all hands on deck for both sides tonight. Should be a big game. Again, more at stake for the Mets than for the Padres because of what the Mets did this season. Padres really never were in the National League West race. They had a very good year in the playoffs, 89 victories, second place to the Dodgers. So we'll see what happens. I mean, Musgrove is pitching for the Padres, Bassett going for the Mets. It's going to come down to pitching. Now, the Mets got some big hits from their big players last night. Lindor, of course, with a home run to get things going. And then Alonso with a home run that really gave the Mets the lift they needed, even more so than the Lindor homer, because the crowd had gotten a bit silent once the Padres came back to tie the game 2-2. It's going to be interesting to see what happens as the Mets take on the Padres in the deciding game of that wild card playoff series tonight at Citi Field. And, well, as I said before, this could be the biggest game in Buck Showalter's managerial career. Biggest game to try and shed the mantle of Buck cannot win the big one. We shall see. Mets, Padres, going to be a lot of fun. Enjoy the baseball. As always, thanks for listening to the podcast. And be sure to follow the podcast. We are in all of the major podcast directories. And remember, when you follow, when you subscribe, then you get the podcast the moment it's published. Thanks for listening. Enjoy the baseball. I'm Dan Lavallo.